the government of national unity took office. And following the formation of the GNU after May's elections, investors have cheered the new political stability in South Africa. However, the government faces challenges in delivering on long-standing infrastructure and policy issues. Investors believe that if the coalition can maintain political stability, it will buy time for deeper reforms to take hold. So, to talk more about the GNU's 100 days, we will be in a short while, in fact, joined by BUSA CEO designate Khulekani Mathe. He's just having a few problems with his laptop, but as soon as he's sorted, we'll bring him into the conversation. But with us, we've got the Research Fellow for African Diplomacy and Leadership at the University of Johannesburg, Dr. Oscar van Heerden. Always a pleasure, Dr. van Heerden. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning, Leanne, and good morning to your viewers.
So, I mean, let's start with the basics. Let me get your view. How do you think they've performed in these last 100 days?
No, I think all cabinet ministers, all senior officials have actually made a good success of the government of national unity. I think there were naysayers, there were those detractors who wanted it not to work, but we can clearly see a commitment from all sides. In the case of the president, we've seen controversial legislation that has been signed, Bella and so forth, and the NHI prior to the formation of this government. But to show commitment that he takes his partners serious within this government of national unity, he has opened it up, so to speak, making sure that certain clauses can still be interrogated and discussed before the final implementation. We've seen from the leader of the opposition party, the DA, Steenhuisen, also showing enthusiastic commitment to the GNU, going to China. You know, it's always interesting, Leanne, that, you know, when you are in the opposition benches, you can shout from afar. But when you are actually in the driving seat, as we now see in certain instances, you need to take responsibility for those cabinet posts, for your mandate. And we see that DA ministers, you know, and others, Gayton McKenzie and so on, are taking their jobs very serious and making steady compromises as they move along to ensure that things actually move forward. We look, for example, at Tshwane and the tension that was there. They are now trying to iron it out in order to make sure that the GNU works. And I think, as you say in your insert, international investors are seeing this. They see that there is a seriousness and a commitment, and they like it.
Yeah. I mean, let's focus on the markets for a bit, because that's, I suppose, the most obvious change and the most obvious confidence that we've seen. So we've seen a big recovery in the currency, 5.8%. But can we read too much into that? Because we're also turning the trajectory here. We're seeing interest rates going lower. We're seeing, a bit of a turnaround. Inflation's coming down. The sentiment is so much better. And I think that is that cyclical sentiment that we always look for. Can we attribute that to the GNU and a bit of stability, or is it really other things at play here?
I think a big factor, Leanne, is exactly the fact that there is stability. You know, what economists and investors want to see is stability. They want to see a commitment to the same policy orientation. They don't like surprises. And what they like about this GNU is that there has been no surprises. The fiscal policy, the monetary policy, Treasury, National Treasury remains committed and intact. As you say, they want to bring the debt levels down, the servicing of the debt levels. They want to see growth in the economy. These are all good signs for investors. I think this is also the messaging that the president and his delegation is having in New York at the General Assembly of the United Nations and at the business forums that they are attending, wanting to give a clear indication that we are still having a similar policy orientation. We want investment to come in so that the economy can grow, so that we can address our triple challenges of unemployment, of poverty and inequality.
Let's talk about this visit to New York. I mean, we've seen the president from what we're seeing, and again, it's what we see in a very good light. I mean, ringing the bell at the New York Stock Exchange, having the world's attention at the UN, meeting with very influential business people. I mean, whether personal feelings aside for Elon Musk, if anybody has any opinions on that, the man has a lot of influence. The two of them having a good conversation and promises of business going forward. You know, this is a far cry from what we did see in not so long ago times when South Africa was, stay away from South Africa. It was very difficult to get people to even visit a stand of South Africa at a global show.
I think, Leanne, you know, the truth of the matter is, if we look globally, if we look at the United States itself, politics is extremely polarized. They're no longer self-partners in government in terms of opposition parties and so forth. What has happened here in South Africa is very difficult to imagine, even in a democracy such as the United States. We see how the Democrats and the Republicans are at each other's throats. We see the polarization in much of European governments and elections. And so to a certain extent, I think people are also recognizing that what South Africa has managed to do is to put their differences aside for the ruling party and opposition parties to come together and look at the interests of the country. And I think, in as much as they're not saying it so loudly, they admire it. You would know that the interviews that President Ramaphosa has done, a few of the commentators has actually commented on this. It's not that we see it very likely to happen elsewhere in the world, and yet it happened here. And the truth is that they like that. They like the fact that people come together, have a stable policy, and move forward. And of course, with regards to Elon Musk, there's two things I would have imagined is on the agenda there. The one is Starlink and the problems and challenges that's there with the BEE legislation and so forth. I'm sure him and the president and Minister Parks Tau would have had a conversation about that. But also, given our thriving automobile sector, I'm sure that electric vehicles and bringing a plant to South Africa would also have been on the agenda. So it's good signs. I think we need to grab it with both hands and hope that the investigation will come.
And stay sustainable, because that is the big word. I'm so glad I can see up in the corner of the screen there, we've got BUSA CEO designate Khulekani Mathe. Mr. Mathe, such a pleasure to have you. Thank you very, very much. We've basically been weighing in on the last 100 days. And I mean, we saw the president out in New York, and he was addressing at the New York Stock Exchange saying it took us just 14 days to formulate this GNU, and look how well we're doing. And he's really out there selling South Africa. But I want to get your opinions on this. Give us a rating. How do you think they've performed in the last 100 days?
Good morning, Leanne. Good morning to Oscar and the viewers. I've been struggling to calculate your 100 days, Leanne.
I think it was 100 days on Sunday, and then of course we're now sitting on Wednesday, so we're a little bit delayed. Let's say 102-3 days, give or take.
Okay. Look, I missed a bit of what Oscar said, but our view is that actually there's been a lot achieved because the change of power in itself, without any disruption, the smoothness with which everything happened is a major achievement by many, many accounts. But we've also seen ministers coming into taking office and really taking their portfolios seriously, working hard to understand their portfolio, to pick up from where the previous administration left off to really drive change. Closer to the sort of ministries that we interact with more closely as business will be the Ministry of Trade and Industry. And we've seen how the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition has, in a space of time, met with various business organizations, really listened to what they had to say, taking business and other stakeholders with him to Washington during the AGOA negotiations. That and really just showing that we are serious about governing, we're serious about working with business, we're serious about moving a dial on some of the issues that are facing South Africa. So our view is that it has been a positive development for South Africa. It has brought about a great deal of optimism in the markets, in the business community, and we think that it bodes well for the country going forward.
Yeah, you know, it's quite incredible. I suppose most of us are pessimists at heart, and although we'd love to be optimists, many are looking at this GNU and wondering, you know, what's going to break it? Is this a very temporary thing, or is there actually a future in this kind of governance? And, you know, that's a question that I think a lot of people are grappling with, everyone watching tentatively from the sidelines to see if it can actually do something concrete. Because, I mean, with all due respect, I mean, in 100 days, it's very hard to determine anything. There is a lot to be fixed. So perhaps, Mr. Mathe, let me come back to you. Do you see this being the way of the future and not just a temporary fix?
So given our type of electoral system, we have probably reached a phase where power will be shared going forward in South Africa. There may be changes every now and then when one party wins an outright majority, but until we change our electoral system, the likelihood is to be in a situation where power is shared between one or more, two or more parties. And so we really think that this is setting the tone, as it were, a framework, as it were, for thinking. Lessons will be learned about how to deal with the deadlock between party and government, where power is shared, where there's some to deal with. We can only hope that learned and that it sets the framework for us going forward as a country. And so we're not looking for what is going to break the GNU. In fact, there's been sort of, certainly mostly from the media, suggesting that, oh, the Bella Bill is going to break the is going to break the GNU. How these matters have been handled, in our view, has been handled with a lot of maturity, which does suggest that the parties are really seeing the long term in this and are not just looking at it as a short-term gain leading up to the next general elections in 2029.
Yeah. Let me bring you back into the conversation, Dr. Van Heerden. I hope, Mr. Mathe, that connection of yours is holding. It's holding on by a thread. We can still hear you, but hopefully it'll even improve more as we sort of speak to Dr. Van Heerden about some of the issues you brought up. And those were, I suppose, leading into those little sticking points, and we can call them little for now, but they may turn into bigger problems, Dr. Van Heerden. That, of course, that Bella Bill and the NHI, because those are very contentious issues and ones where we saw the signing of that bill was going to happen, and then the minister who belonged to the DA was not going to be going to the signing, and you know there were big issues there, and many thought this could be that moment, but it wasn't. As Mr. Mathe said, perhaps it's the maturity that is shining through. But do you want to weigh in on those two sticking points?
Yeah, Leanne, you know, the truth of the matter is that this is a new normal. This is how the world has been operating with regards to governance. Coalition governments in Europe is the norm. It's something new to us. And in as much as there are these policy differences and people feel very strongly about it, this new normal has to guide us through that process. And what I mean by that is that, you know, we are not all going to get what we want. The ANC is going to push hard. And of course, opposition parties are going to try and stick to their guns. But at the end of the day, the maturity that Khulekani is talking about will have to come through, where we say, perhaps here we compromise, we will give you this one, but on the next one we are going to be much harder, and so forth and so on. So that kind of cajoling, lobbying, negotiating, that is going to be the norm going forward. I would want to say, Leanne, I don't think it's going to be so much policy, big policy differences that's going to break this GNU. The two big stress tests that is coming is indeed the 2026 local government election. How badly are parties going to fare, particularly the ANC as the majority party, because a further significant loss during that local government elections will perhaps rally certain individuals within the party to say this GNU is not working, we need to break it, and so forth. And then the second stress test is indeed in 2027, when the ANC is going for its national elective conference to elect a new leader. Remember, this GNU is very much the creation of the President Ramaphosa, Cyril Ramaphosa. When he leaves, when he departs, what is the future of the GNU? I think those are the two big stress tests for this GNU.
And there are many schools of thought, and we've seen them at play within the ruling party, within the ANC, you know, to talk about the fact that, you know, some have been for the GNU, but there are a lot that are against it. And I suppose it's trying to find out. And Mr. Van Heerden, I'll stay with you in terms of the whole contentiousness within the ranks of the ANC. And when that 2027 arrives, you know, that would be a big moment and a big test for the GNU. Let's perhaps dwell on that for a bit. I mean, the two schools of thought there?
No, exactly. I mean, what we have currently, you asked the question to Khulekani about the future of this GNU. Is this the norm? The reality is that in a coalition between the two major parties, the ANC and the DA represents, Leanne, an established, predominantly, not exclusively, but predominantly white middle class, but an established middle class, whereas the ANC predominantly has an aspirant black middle class. And these two middle classes have come together. That's really what this GNU is, the established middle class and the aspirant, because their views and what they search for in life it's more or less the same. We can quibble about language here and about NHI there, but at the end of the day, people want quality healthcare and they want quality education and so forth. And so that's the future we're looking at. If the ANC or any other party for that matter, MKP or the EFF, want to go the route of what we see happening in Europe, for example, more populist parties, people who are populist in their views, they tell the electorate what they want to hear, but then when it comes to delivering, they can't deliver. There's no money to deliver and so forth. So, you know, it's a very delicate situation, and I think that there is obviously still a chance. I'm one of those that still maintain that there is, as Khulekani says, a chance that the ANC might still come back and win 50+1 again. But the reality is, what we see with the two middle classes coming together, that's likely to be the norm going forward.
Yeah, indeed. Khulekani, let's come to you, because one thing we haven't touched on, and we've looked at quite a lot of it, and mostly the good news, but what the future holds, which is, you know, something that we'll have to see as it develops. But the reality, let's bring this close to home, because we can put market rallies and currencies that are doing well and bond markets that are doing well to one side, and look at the actual infrastructure backlog that we as a country are going through. Energy, granted, we haven't had load shedding, but we're in for, if Eskom gets their way, major increases in the price of electricity, the logistics network from rails, ports, water supply, threats of massive water interruptions, and also all of this requires massive modernization efforts, and it presents a big hurdle to what the biggest problem in this country is: economic growth, which is, everything aside, we need to see growth and job creation. Perhaps you want to weigh in on that and the role of the GNU in this issue.
Right, Leanne. That warriors is business, which is why we have decided not just to sit on the sidelines of these particular issues, but to get involved. You will know that business has a partnership with government on addressing the issues of energy, transport and logistics, as well as corruption. As you say, energy side, we haven't had load shedding for a while now, and chances are, or at least indications are, that the worst is behind us. What we are likely to face going forward on the energy front. So in trying to fix the problem, we actually held on cost into the system such that power is going to, or electricity is going to be more expensive. And so that is the challenge that we now need to try and resolve in relation to energy. Transport and logistics, similarly, the private sector is partnering with the net those issues. And whereas 2 years ago there was a real deep in volumes that Transnet was able to move with step, and now we need to work to try and turn things up. And so there again, we think that we are going to make progress. But of course, it does require we get models in place that allow greater private sector participation in these issues, because infrastructure is very important. Our balance sheet as a country is pretty weak, and so we would need the private sector to come in and process that infrastructure within the right governance frameworks and the right sort of guardrails to make sure that we do this within an agreed framework. So these are opportunities. We're not seeing them as something that's going to kill us. We have already suffered the consequences of the declines in transport and logistics. Mining companies have been reporting a loss of profits, etc. So now there's an opportunity to fix those and create, spur growth in different directions on the back of having invested in infrastructure in the country.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you. Thank you very, very much for weighing in on this conversation, talking 100 days of the GNU, what has been achieved, what, of course, are the challenges going forward, and still a lot to get through. But Khulekani Mathe, BUSA CEO Designate, and Dr. Oscar van Heerden, a Senior Research Fellow for African Diplomacy and Leadership at the University of Johannesburg, thank you very, very much for weighing in on that conversation. All right, let's quickly take a break. We'll be back with you after this.
Welcome to Game of Talents, where the worlds of talent show and game show collide.
Okay, guys, show us your talents.
8 incredible performers. But can you guess what their talent is before they perform?
Is he a magician? Please be a chainsaw Dad Lappy. Any of those things.
With the help of a celebrity